Well, the situation is VOECKLER began the day 5 minutes 24 ahead of Lance Armstrong. Armstrong is in the group about a minute ahead of him or so now. He's beginning to get a little bit closer to that yellow jersey, but the Plateau de Bay is still 62 kilometers away, and this looks like it is Francisco Mancebo, who has ridden well on this particular stage and yesterday's stage 2 years ago when Armstrong was taking the Tour de France in an iron grip. Mancebo is a danger, and I'm not sure that the US Postal boys will allow this to go on for long.
Well, they dare not. He's actually in 7th place in the overall classification. He's around about 1:20 behind Armstrong. He's 6:43 behind the overall leader, Thomas VOECKLER. But what's more important is his relationship to the big contenders. And as you can see, he's got a slightly different jersey on his shoulders to the rest of the riders from the Balearic Islands team. He's actually the Spanish national champion this season. Now, at the back, this acceleration by Spain at the front is condemning another Spanish rider at the back, number 111, the winner last year of the Vuelta a España, 34th overall last year in the Tour de France, brought in this year to Liberty Seguros as the top man and the leader to challenge Armstrong. Well, that challenge is not going to come, I don't think, in 2004.
It's unbelievable today. 21, Tyler Hamilton, the leader of Phonak, gone. 31, Iban Mayo, the leader of Euskaltel, still in the race, but gone as far as the overall is concerned. Now 111, the boss of the Liberty Seguros team, he's gone as well, HERAS. Mancebo has attacked. Mancebo, by the way, 2 years ago, finished 15th on this stage, 3 minutes 17 seconds behind Lance Armstrong. Maybe he's remembering that, and he's trying to get some time on him right now, because here he is.
He's not afraid, he's not scared of going out and actually attacking the blue armada of Lance Armstrong. This is the back of the group, 1 or 2 riders in a spot of bother being left behind there. The man just getting dropped off here is Juan Miguel Mercado, who was very good a couple of days ago. One of Armstrong's teammates there, Tricky Beltran, not riding in really excellent form for the moment. Maybe he'll kick in when we go into the Alps in a couple of days' time.
He's worked pretty hard, though. Remember, this is a day of past storming, and now he's done his bit, and maybe it's time to just try and save some energy for next week. If you think this weekend's hard, we're going to be talking like this all next week, because it is such a hard end. We still have the individual time trial up no less than Alpe d'Huez. They're going to barrier the last 3 miles or 5 kilometers of that road because they're expecting in excess of 1 million people on the slopes of the Alps. The Tour de France is still in its early stages for many.
We're going to have a big showdown on the final climb of the day, certainly. If you see the pressure that's being put on this race by US Postal on the front, there are a lot of tired bodies in this race. People criticised Armstrong for losing his yellow jersey on stage 5 after they dominated the team time trial with a rapid performance by his team, defeating everybody by over a minute. But I think what it showed was Armstrong was very intelligent to allow them to lose the jersey and force another team to do the pacemaking along the flat.
Just look at these riders here, cracking one by one here. Armstrong has gone, Sandy Cazar borrowing the white jersey from the current yellow jersey. Thomas VOECKLER is here now on the left of our picture. He's 3rd overall in the race, and he's now battling to hold wheels here. There's so many riders who are now blowing away to the world as the Armstrong-led peloton just maintains the same tempo. They're not attacking, they're just keeping the tempo, and if you can't match it, you fall back.
It's an unbelievable tempo that they're setting. They're condemning a lot of riders now to having to ride to the finish on their own. This man here, I expected to ride well in the overall classification, Michele Scarponi. He's 3rd in the Best Young Rider competition. He too just can't hang on to the back end of this bus.
I'll tell you what, other big names. Ivan Basso, who has projected himself, is still in this group. Jan Ullrich is still there, and so too is Levi Leipheimer. Those 3 riders haven't cracked yet. Mancebo has made the move, but now it's getting a bit difficult. He can't really open up the gap. And I think, in fact, he's going to go back here. Now, they lifted the tempo pole to bring him back. And what they did, they destroyed HERAS, and they destroyed Sandy Cazar, and Laurent Brochot I saw go as well. And still the posties are coming on. This express mail system works pretty well, doesn't it?
It's pretty good. It's an overnight delivery if you really want it.
Well, you know, you take your hat off to every cyclist just to get into the Tour de France. You are the best in the world. Then when you clash with the best of the best, this is what happens. And you need the team around you, because these boys are built to look after Lance Armstrong. When their energy goes, they get out of the way and they make room for the next man.
Look at that there, Floyd Landis on the front, just setting the tempo. Right behind him, Hincapie. Hincapie got his jersey ripped open this afternoon. Let's not forget the temperature is here at the Tour de France now. It's not the 15 degrees Celsius we had over the first week of racing. We're in the valley roads in excess of 30 degrees Celsius. The only thing that helps these riders is at the top of the climbs, the temperature does drop a little bit. There's the yellow jersey. Struggling to stay in the bike race, but doing a fabulous job.
Well, he continues to climb towards the top of the Col d'Agnès. That's where we are now. We've got a little climb coming before we start the big one, the Plateau de Baille. The big one, I think that's an understatement. They're all big today. We've destroyed half the Tour de France on this climb with nobody really attacking anybody. The body has just given up on so many riders. We still have 60 kilometers to go. The Basque flag shown there to the two leaders. They are still together. Just look ahead. That is the Col d'Agnès, and we've still got to climb.
Yes, we just went past the sign indicating 1 kilometer to go to the summit, and there's a lot of climbing to go before we get to the finishing line as well. A face there of absolute and utter concentration. He's he is in what we call in cycling jargon the zone. He's not thinking about anything. He's just trying to concentrate on ticking those legs over at a fairly steady tempo. That is where they have to go. You see the lines of the people going all the way up to the summit of this climb of the Col d'Agnès, and don't think this is an impressive climb. There are 2 more to come. There's immediately after this one the Port de l'Ers, and then I hope the riders have a bit of respite for 25 kilometers or so, because it drops down into the valley. But then it's the big one of the Pyrenees, the biggest climb we've had so far, the climb up to the Plateau de Baille.
Well, there we see the Maillot Jaune again. Riding with him is Juan Miquel Mercado of Spain, one of the climbers on the Quick-Step de Vitamin team. But we still got Richard Virenque, the team captain. He's up front with Paolo Bettini, trying to sneak the best of the rest over these climbs. The yellow jersey far from giving up, has he? He's fighting his way still and could well yet reintegrate that group. It's a long way, I know, but the roads get a little bit easier for a while. It's 38 miles or 60 kilometers from the top. The leaders aren't that far now from the top. As we top it over, we go with 59 to go once we reach the top. So they must be in the last kilometer, these two.
They're just inside of the last kilometer, but you get an idea to see just how savage and vicious these Pyrenean climbs are. They are so ragged and jagged all the way across the frontier between France and Belgium, and over France and Spain, I should say. Unfortunately, it's been
they'd like it to be France and Belgium right now.
I think they would. It's been the ragged nature, really, of these Pyrenean mountains that's kept the two countries apart for many years throughout their history.
They have indeed. They were natural frontiers, of course. And the one town that broke away from them all was Andorra. 700 years ago, became its own principality. And the riders not going to Andorra this time around, and as it's all hills, I'm sure they're very pleased with that. Once the happy hunting ground of Jan Ullrich, he laid the foundation of a great victory in Andorra. In fact, as he went on to win the Tour de France in 1997. Happier days, I think. Ullrich is yet to make a move here, and look at the crowd here as they come up towards the summit of the Col d'Agnès. It'll leave them 59 kilometers to go. The last 15 are what they'll worry about as they climb the Plateau de Baille. T-Mobile, but where is Jan Ullrich? Was on the flag there.
The faces now of the US Postal riders, that's Landis. There is George Hincapie, the big rider from New York. His family heritage comes from Colombia. His dad was born in Bogota and came across the United States a long time ago and became himself a very good amateur cyclist. The two leaders now are approaching the summit of the climb, and this time it's going to be a different name. It's going to be Rasmussen who gets maximum points over the top there, ahead of Jens Voigt. And Sylvain Chabanel, if he survives in this instance, will get himself third place. So they now begin the long descent. Well, in fact, it's not so bad. The descent is around about 7 kilometers, and then they'll start to go up once again. Chechu Ribiera is in there. Looking down here, there's the yellow jersey. He's got himself into a nice group. By the way, Iban Mayo, the rider in the orange jersey of Euskaltel Euskadi, not this rider, but the man who we regarded as a big favorite for the race overall, is 7.5 minutes behind Armstrong's group.
Well, the good thing for VOECKLER rather, Paul, is that he's got some men around him to help him try and chase back. He's probably about, there's the Armstrong bunch. He might get back yet.
He's around about 40 seconds. It doesn't look very far on a climb, but it is actually quite a long way because you're covering the kilometers every 2 minutes or so. Yes, I think he could get back on the descent. He has got the advantage to have integrated a group. He'll be able to take some respite from the fact that he's in a group with other riders, and they'll be able to take some risks on the descent. This team here, though, is doing a sterling job. And you know, one thing is they haven't actually really turned up the screws. They're just riding a tempo. This is probably the same tempo that they rode this course in training about 2 months ago. That, I think, is the amazing thing about Armstrong. He almost has ridden the Tour de France twice before he comes here.
That's right. I can now give you the composition of that Armstrong group. So here we go. Armstrong, Acevedo, Hincapie, Landis and Rubiera, all members of US Postal. ULLRICH, Andreas Clouden and Guerini of T-Mobile, Pereiro of Phonak, Christophe Moreau of Crédit Agricole, Basso, who won yesterday, Manthebo and Carpets of the Balearic Islands team, Georg Tocznik of Gerolstein and Richard Vironk of Quickstep, Cauchioli of Alessio, Goubert, AG2R, Leipheimer of Rabobank, and Gilberto Simoni has got back. We just saw his red jersey tagged on to the end. That's the leading group now, chasing the two leaders.
Very good to see Gilberto Simoni, the winner of the Giro d'Italia on 2 occasions. He's having a hard time at the Tour de France. In fact, in the first 3 or 4 days, he was so fed up with the race, he'd actually said he was going to abandon and go home to Italy. I'm glad he stayed in, because now he'll get a chance to show us on one day or another just how good he is as a climber. He is a magical climber. He's won stages at the top of mountains in not only the Tour de France and the Tour of Spain, but also the Tour of Italy. He's just here on the back end of this group as we look at it under complete control of the blue train. The US Postal Service of Lance Armstrong are now taking the Tour de France into a new phase, the phase where he hopes to take over the lead.
So, a change in the pacemaking. Here we have Landis now. Hincapie drops 1 place back. Vironk getting poised on the left of our picture as we look, and Moreau is lining up behind him. It's the old French 1-2 for what will be, I think, the 4th place climb. I don't think we've caught Chavanel yet. We haven't seen him go over the top. He's still up ahead, only just there. Vironk waiting till the last possible moment to surge from the pack. And Moreau has never yet beaten Vironk. He's tried hard enough, and here we go again. He looks across, sees where Moreau is, and he gives it his best shot. And Richard Vironk is continuing to lead the King of the Mountains. He's losing a little bit of ground, nothing to worry him on Chavanel, because Chavanel very shortly will be back in this group and probably behind it. There he goes, Vironk and Moreau in that order.
Just a quick look at the time gap there, 3 minutes and 44 seconds from the leading group of 2, right back to this group containing Armstrong. There's Gilberto Simoni in the red jersey at the back. 2 times a winner of the Giro d'Italia. This year, 2nd, 3rd overall behind his own teammate, Damiano Cunego. And here is the yellow jersey group. We'll get a time here to see the difference between the yellow jersey group and the group containing Lance Armstrong. But once again, Phil, I think almost the whole of the world is behind this kid in the yellow jersey. He's been so courageous. It's a name we've hardly ever mentioned on any of the races we've commentated on this year, but this year this man will never ever be the same person again.
He will always be a man for the Tour now in many people's books, as we see yet another stunning view of the mountains. This is a lot further down, I have to tell you now. This is Ibon Mayo. He just wants to get to the finish as best he can. He knows all of his fans are waiting for him. They'll still cheer him, you know, even if he doesn't win. But he's an awful long way behind. 4 minutes 40 is the official time gap we're hearing now from the main Armstrong group. And we think that the yellow jersey is about 56 seconds behind that group. That's bridgeable on the descent.
Very bridgeable. My old mate Sean Yates could go down a mountain like this and bridge a gap of 2.5 minutes if he took a certain number of risks, and riders might just do that. But the story of the day is the wearing down of all of the opponents of Lance Armstrong. Pre-race favourites have disappeared. Haimar Zubeldia, 5th in the Tour de France last year, has abandoned. His teammate here, Ibon Mayo, is currently more than 8 minutes behind Lance Armstrong, and he's the man who smashed Armstrong in the time trial of the Dauphiné Libéré earlier on this year.
That's right. Hamilton has gone as well, of course. Denis Menchov, the best rookie of last year, white jersey, he has given up. Fabian Wegman, the winner of the King of the Mountains in the Tour of Italy, he has gone. Heras has been dropped, can you believe? Mayo is in trouble. The others are following US Postal and wondering what on earth is going to happen next.
So this is the descent now. This is the daredevil scent of what is called the Groupe Maillot Jaune, the group of the yellow jersey. This man at the top of the climb was 56 seconds in arrears, and he wants to get back to Lance Armstrong. Let's not forget, at the start of the day, this guy was 5 minutes, 24 seconds ahead of Armstrong in the overall classification. He hasn't lost very much of that on the 5th climb of the day. He's got 2 more climbs to go, but he is going to make it an absolutely and utterly daredevil descent of this mountain to try and do one thing, that is integrate the group of Lance Armstrong for the next climb of the day. Armstrong's group here, they're not really racing, they're just riding at a tempo, they're just making themselves do the job of setting a train of movement on the front end of the peloton. They're not really trying to break the yellow jersey, they're not trying to control the race, they're just riding along, doing their job.
That is why I think that they'll continue just freewheeling down this mountain, because there's no reason to race down. And I think we'll see the yellow jersey return. I certainly hope so, because he should be able to get over the Porte de l'Air, which takes us in the last 50 kilometers. And if he can get to the bottom of the plateau with 15 to go, he's not going to finish with the big riders. But he's just a chance, just a chance. He won't lose 5 minutes to Armstrong, and he'll continue to lead this race. Because whoever leads this race today, in theory, will also lead it tomorrow night, which is the eve of our second race day.
Absolutely. If Thomas Voeckler can keep the yellow jersey on his shoulders this afternoon, he should keep it right through until the stage that goes up to Villard-de-Lans, and then he may well have a hard time defending. But I have a feeling he might actually lose it on this final climb of the day, because, Phil, the climb up to the summit of the Plateau de Bay is unforgiving. It's 16 kilometers long. It's 10 miles of ascension. And despite the fact that Thomas Voeckler has done a brilliant job, a courageous job, he's used a lot more efforts than any of these other riders just trying to stay in contact.
Yeah, I agree with you more. I'm trying to will him on. I have to say, I love a fighter, and you won't see one better than Thomas Voeckler. He refuses to give up. He must have gone through all shades of pain that we can only imagine, and said to himself, no, I'm not going to give up, and he's come back each and every time. Sooner or later, his body simply won't do it, but he's never going to give this race up without a fight. There he is on the way down, and I still feel, as he starts to pick off the motorbikes here, you see he's left everybody else behind on this descent except one rider, so he's again using all of his energy and taking risks to try and get back to that Armstrong group.
It's great stuff to watch. You can see him on this descent, and he'll be going round these corners at tipping speeds on this descent of approaching 70 to 80 kilometers an hour. In the long, straighter parts of the descent, he will possibly touch 100 kilometers an hour, which is pretty impressive speed to touch on a bicycle, especially when you think that those small tires there are not very much wider than a centimeter. This is the next climb of the day, and this will be the 6th climb that these riders have dragged their bodies over here this afternoon. There we are, right at the end of that hacksaw blade. It's the 3rd category climb of the Porte de l'Air. It's only 3.8 kilometers in distance, and I say only because some of the climbs we've been over so far have been exceptionally long, and it is an average climbing gradient of 5.7%. And it really hurts when you've been down a long descent, and these guys descended for about 7 kilometers before the roads kicked up again, because the body starts to chill down a little bit after a big effort getting up a climb, and then you're forcing down the descent. The chill factor brings your body temperature down from around about 35 degrees C down to around about 20, and that has an effect of actually tetanizing the muscles and forcing the muscles not to respond, and it takes a kilometer or so to get back into the rhythm. So Jens Voigt, second place. There's the yellow jersey. He's about to make the junction. He's back in contact here with the cars of the group of Lance Armstrong. A wave back. I don't believe it. This is amazing. The yellow jersey, Thomas Voeckler, is not too far away from the group of Lance Armstrong. In fact, the race referee has left a bit of a gap there, which is not really all that fair.
unbelievable, Paul. We know these boys are just holding tempo. They're not worried about the yo-yoing of Thomas Voeckler. But even so, take your hat off to him, because he's taken big risks on the way down. He went over the top, almost a minute behind them, and now he's almost on the tail of the convoy.
That's great stuff, and I know he must have taken a lot of risks on those corners just to make sure he cut off a couple of seconds every time he went into a corner on the group being led here by Lance Armstrong's group. But he didn't quite make the junction there, Phil, before they started to kick up once again. His teammates have spent all of their energy on the flat days leading down here to the Pyrenees, and right now they're paying the toll. You know, the difficult thing about winning the Tour de France is to have a strong team that will be present at the most strategic points. And that's why Lance Armstrong lost the lead on stage 5. He didn't want to burn his teammates out over the 8 days that we've seen Thomas Voeckler leading this bike race, because if they'd led from then until now, we wouldn't be seeing the blue train on the front of this peloton.
No, they probably would have had no legs left, but we still got Sylvain Chavanel, the teammate of Voeckler, up the road. He's still riding in 3rd place, but he is on his own. Armstrong's group has been recharged, by the way. We've just seen Michael, forgotten his name, I've had a total blank. The Australian rider.
Michael Rogers.
I couldn't think of his name. I was thinking of Michael Wright, the old English rider who rode the Tour of Britain.
No, we didn't even speak any
the Tour
English.
de France. And he never spoke any English either. He was born in England and he lived his life in Belgium. Couldn't speak a word of English. Yes, Michael Rogers has rejoined the Armstrong group, so he's back there now. And that is good news for the Australians, because he's getting better every day. And Scarponi has also rejoined the group here. Now we see here, right on the front, all of the survivors today of US Postal Service. Landis there looking at camera. And this group is still not really catching up with anybody, but, well, they are really. They've knocked off a minute now as they try to bring back those 2 leaders.
The team that have done the best on these Pyrenean stages, I have to say, is the blue team here. The team of Lance Armstrong. They have got 5 riders in this very select group at the front end of the bike race, to 3 riders from T-Mobile, from 2 from the rest, and most of the other teams have only got 1 man left in there. I have to think that if you look there at this man, I've said on a number of occasions this afternoon that he's going to lose his jersey. I think he still is, but what a battle we're witnessing from this young 25-year-old Frenchman trying to stay in the lead.
He also must stay somewhere in the proximity of Sandy Cassar, otherwise he'll lose his lead in the white jersey competition, because tomorrow he could pull that jersey on and replace it for the yellow. This is the scene behind, with still the boys in the orange jersey of Iban Mayo, beginning to pick off riders now who have been given best on the climbs, and he's picking through. Maybe he's recovering.
It was Isidro Nozel. Sorry about the picture breakup, but that is because of the altitude here and the fact that we are in the very high mountain passes. And every now and again you get a little bit of picture breakup in the live link from the motorbike to the helicopter and down here towards the finishing line. But this is the group a long way behind as well, which is probably why we're getting a weak signal coming up, because Iban Mayo is around about 10 minutes behind the group of Lance Armstrong.
Yes, and showing no concern now that as a professional rider, he knows his place, he knows he's been beaten now as they come up over the top here of the Col d'Agnès.
14 minutes behind the leaders. And so that puts him actually around about 11 minutes behind Armstrong. But actually, as the French would say, Phil, chapeau. Tip your hat to that man, because he didn't climb off. I know he wanted to. Psychologically, he was broken. He'd come into this event as a contender. Now he's an also-ran. But let's not forget, sometimes the also-rans can create a bit of confusion in the last week of the race once we go up to the Alps.
He's a likely stage winner in the Alps now, because Lance Armstrong won't have any reason to chase him down. Not now. 40 minutes now at the Plateau de Baille to carry. He could be half an hour down, but more likely about 20, 23 minutes when he gets up to the finishing line. Floyd Landis, his jaw set, is now getting to the front and giving it his best shot as well. As we go up to the 2 leaders, they're coming up towards the top of the Porte de l'Est. This is only a mere 3rd category climb, yet they've been out of the saddle all the way up, I think. The gap at the moment is 2 minutes to Sylvain Chavanel, 3 minutes 32 to the Armstrong group, and 4 minutes to the Maillot Jaune group. That's a 4-minute spread, and there's still a chance that Voeckler will get back into the tail of the convoy behind the Armstrong group. This is Chavanel. I thought he'd really hit the wall and was going to just stop almost when he did crack, but he seems to have recovered a little bit.
He's got back into his rhythm, that rider there. He's a very good, talented bike rider. The French people believe that he's going to be one of the big stars of the future. He's got into his own rhythm on the slopes of this mountain. As I said earlier when we were talking about Iban Mayo, very often in a race, you can have a bad patch for 3, 4, 10 kilometers. If you can ride through it, you can very often recover. I can't come up with a physiological explanation as to why that happens. It could be that your body's not taking in enough sugar for a moment of time, or some other weird physiological reason, maybe even associated to psychology. But if you ride through it, you can always come back.
And Rasmussen has gone over the top there with 50 kilometers left to ride, just 31 miles to the finish. And still, Voigt isn't worried about taking first place. He's happy to be there, I think, right now. They have been in the lead for 125 kilometers today on what is the most vicious day in the mountains so far. It's not just the mountains today. There's no sign of rain. It is very, very hot. There is also a very strong crosswind blowing for most of the way. This is Chavanel still trying to get over third, and I think he should. He was 2 minutes behind the 2 leaders on the last climb, which was the Col d'Agnès, and he's just about going to go over here. He's, if anything, believe it or not, he's actually closed the gap a little bit to those 2 leaders. He's now currently a minute 55, which is quite amazing.
Well, once he gets to the top of this next climb here at the Porte de l'Est, he's got a very long descent into the small town of Niort at the bottom. They go downhill for around about 30 kilometers all in all till they get into the final little town of Alos, which is where the climb up to the Plateau de Bay begins. But unfortunately for the 3 leaders, they are still looking at 31 miles to go to the finish from the top of this climb, which is a long, long way. So sitting at the back there, the man wearing number 9 is Chechu Rubiera, the faithful lieutenant of Lance Armstrong. He himself not a bad bike rider in his own right. This is the next group on the road. Just in front of the yellow jersey, by the way, there is Laurent Brochard. You can tell him by the style that he has when he gets out of the saddle. He's a man who for France was a former world champion. And the yellow jersey, once again, is clawing his way slowly but surely back into the race.
Oh, he's unbelievable. He's making so many friends this week. It is incredible. From around the world too, because we get a lot of emails from around the world who see these pictures, and they know this man's name now, and they're always asking how he is. Well, he's struggling, but he's okay. As we go back up to the 3rd place man over the top here of the Porte de l'Est. 50 kilometers to go now. As the clock continues to count, it'll be about 2:10, 2:15 behind, so he's lost a little bit on the final ascension. No more hills now, except the Plateau de Bay.
No more hills yet for a while anyway. They've got about 30 kilometers of descent, and then it's all uphill to the finish line. It is a very long climb up here, around about 15.9 kilometers to the top of the Plateau de Bay. So Chavanel there just holding on to 3rd place, and it really looks quite awful that you only get 4 points for going over the summit of that climb, because it looked a lot more difficult than some of the 3rd category climbs in the first week of the Tour.
It did indeed, but of course in the first week of the Tour they have a problem finding any hills, so they get a slightly higher category than they're probably worth for the early part of the Tour. They wouldn't rate at all now we're down in the high mountains. There is the Maillot Jaune. He's got a few helpers around him there, and I think that's Sandy Cassar in front of him. So if it is, and then he's got him in the right place, and I think it is because Cassar is not up with the leading group.
So there's Richard Virenque. There's Cavchioli in this group as well. It's nice to see Cavchioli riding so well. Virenque has been actually quite amazing in this Tour. Let's not forget, Richard Virenque is approaching 35 years of age. He's been a professional for a very long time. Turned professional back in 1991, and it's quite remarkable. Here's the acceleration from Virenque, and it's just for 4 points. It's not really worth Christophe Moreau going out of the group now, because there are no more points available after 4th place.
That's right, 3rd category climb, stops at the 4th man over the top. There's the few points in the bag, but those few points are adding up, and he is moving so well clear before we get down into the Alps, where there are many more hills awaiting them. So Virenque, let me see now, he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, that's his 5th, 4th place today, Paul.
Well, he's ticking away and just keeps getting more points than any of the other riders in the competition who are trying to take over the lead from him. Although when we do the addition of points at the end of the day, I would say that Chavanel and Rasmussen have certainly bolted up that overall classification. There's the yellow jersey group, and he's actually closed out. He was 56 seconds behind at the top of the final climb, and now he's just 32 seconds behind Lance Armstrong. So I reckon on this descent, he will in fact make the junction with the group of Lance Armstrong and still remain the overall leader on the race with just one climb to go. The final climb of the day, which brings us up to the massive heights here of 1,780 meters. Just inside of 6,000 feet, 5,840 feet to be exact, which is not far from the same altitude as Nairobi. Looking out, there are a few clouds high up in the sky, but it doesn't look as if they're going to bring any rain into the event here this afternoon, as we had yesterday, which made the descent of the Col d'Aspin absolutely treacherous. Now, as I said a little earlier, you just see that man getting on board some food. These are the wild horses of the Pyrenees. They roam free in this part of the world, and they have been out here for many, many years. And those, in fact, on the other side of the valley are the spectators. Thousands of them have turned out here to watch this stage today. I would say when we get the official viewing figures from the side of the road here at the Tour de France, we will expect it to be pretty close to 1 million people who've turned out to watch the Tour de France. And quite possibly around about 300,000 of those people will be on this final climb of the day, spread over 16 kilometers of the race. So that's the group of Armstrong, and if we just pull back a little bit, I think we will see, and there it is, the group of the yellow jersey. And so he is going to get himself back into this bike race. And a few moments ago, I thought it was all over for this young man, Thomas VOECKLER, whose family have moved across here to France from Martinique to witness the days that their son is spending in the yellow jersey, and I think they are really being pushed through all kinds of emotions here this afternoon. So on the front, still complete and utter control from Lance Armstrong and his US Postal Service. Armstrong had said before the start of the Tour de France that this was going to be one of the most difficult stages, and I have a funny feeling that he's definitely going to count on his teammates. Landis on the front, Hincapie second, Acevedo third, Armstrong, and then the other man making up the 5 men is Ribiera.
Well, it was only third category, Paul, but you've got to watch your way down because these are very tight bends on the Porte d'Alès.
Tricky descent, and it was nice to see that the yellow jersey was only 30 seconds in arrears at the summit of that climb there. And there he is. You can just see him through the trees there. He's not far off the back, and it is Sandy Cassar with him in the white jersey. So we'll see the young rider Cassar, who's at the moment still well up in the overall classification. He started the day very high up there in third place, 5 minutes and 50 seconds down, but those two riders are locked together in the battle for the supremacy in the young rider competition.
They are. Sandy Cassar would have to beat the yellow jersey by nearly 6 minutes if he's to lose his lead in that competition to Sandy Cassar. So if he does lose the yellow today, stands a very good chance of riding in the white as the best rookie tomorrow. Now we are heading down. There's the mountain points for you. The riders, by the way, a mere 4.32. There was a 1 point, by the way, for Richard Virenque in the 4th place. But Virenque has had a great day. 5 4th places in the mountains. 128 points now for Richard Virenque. Rasmussen has moved in to 2nd place, and the Merckx, who was 2nd, dropped away to 4th. He is in the group with Armstrong, by the way, Axel Merckx, albeit he had to chase to get back there.
Good to see Axel getting up there. Jan Ullrich is in that group as well. That's not a problem for him. And possibly the future leader of T-Mobile is in the group as well. The man who finished 3rd on yesterday's stage, Andreas Kloden. Also, the man who won the stage to the summit of the very difficult climb of La Mongie, Ivan Basso. Most of the men who rode well yesterday have integrated the route. But again, we've actually seen a lot of big contenders fall by the wayside this afternoon, and I suppose the most dramatic news is the abandon of Tyler Hamilton. And I think, Phil, it's the first time he's ever abandoned in the Tour de France ever since he started to participate.
That is absolutely right. One man who hasn't got back, and we saw him slip off, though, was Roberto HERAS. He's not here at the moment, and that seemed to be eliminating him as well from the likely high finish at the end of the Tour de France. Just allowing Landis to stay at the front the whole way at the moment now, US Postal, and steer them down the mountain. Christophe Moreau will be very happy being in this group, the only man in his Credit Agricole team who is, as they continue what is a long descent here now as we drop off the heights down to the valley. ULLRICH is the town where we have the second and last sprint time bonus of the day. That'll take us into the last 23 kilometers, which is just 9 kilometers to go before we start the climb of the Plateau de Bailly. There they come, snaking through. Very tortuous descents here. But the yellow jersey now, there he is. He's out of the saddle coming round the corners as he quickly tries to move up the group. He is such a clever bike rider as well, and goodness knows how he must feel. He must be absolutely shattered.
I think we'll talk about this young man a lot more in the future, because after all, he's only just turned 25 years of age. And the strange thing, I remember my uncle telling me once, my uncle was a very good rugby player. He said that a rider or an athlete's body naturally changes when you get to 27, 28, 29 years of age. There's something that happens when you actually fill out and take a little bit more muscle mass, and that's when the moment is that your body gets that little bit more stamina. So that's what this young man, Thomas Voeckler, has got to look forward to over the next couple of years. He will get that bit stronger. He will get a slightly heavier upper body, plus the ability to make this endurable effort over a longer period of time. And we could be possibly looking at the next winner of the Tour de France for France.
Well, that would be absolutely amazing. They could certainly do with that. They've been very sorry since Bernard Hinault retired, as they've never really had a big winner since then, not in the Tour de France anyway. But they always get something out of this race, and none more than this year. They're having one of the best tours for probably 10 years. There's the very select group. It's certainly grown in size now. Must be about 45 riders have got back together on the descent. US Postal waiting now for the start of the Plateau de Bailly. When it comes, I don't think that they will again do any more than their tempo riding. If anybody feels they can get rid of them, then it'll be down to them to attack. Depending on who them are, that'll decide whether Lance Armstrong moves or sits tight.
Well, I know Spain wants to get the victory this afternoon, but there's not really that many Spaniards left in that leading group. Having a look down, I do know that Francisco Mancebo is in the group. He'd be thinking about trying to get a win. Sylvain Chavanel is caught in no man's land. The two leaders are around about 2 minutes in front of him. Chavanel's had a pretty good season so far this year, and I think we were all very surprised when he won the 4 days of Dunkirk. But to prove that it was no fluke, he actually backed it up with a win in the Tour of Belgium about 2 weeks later.
Yep. He's a very good stage race rider, but he had a big ambition today. It hasn't really worked out for him. He's tired now, that's for sure. He'll get swept up very, very shortly on the Valley Road when we get there, of course. This is the Armstrong-led descent at the moment.
Well, they've now basically got all of the hard roads behind them. Just one last difficult piece of a 16-kilometer road, which is the ascent after the Plateau de Bailly, which is a very nice plateau up here. It's a very well-known ski station during the winter months. There's no snow on the ground here where we're actually commentating from, but looking up to the summits around us in the Pyrenees, the craggy look of the Pyrenees, there still is quite a bit of snow sitting on the mountain slopes, and it is one of the great cross-country skiing areas. Chavanel now being picked up, so now the race situation is there are just two leaders off the front end of the main field. The men who attacked after just 30 kilometers of racing, Jens Voigt, the German, and Sylvain Chavanel. They have a 3-minute advantage over the group of the yellow jersey and Lance Armstrong.
Well, everywhere we go today, little gaggles of people cheer the riders through. Jens Voigt, this man was attacking on day 1. Here he is still attacking on day 13 of the road stage of the Tour de France. Little word of advice coming for Rasmussen. These two sort of we're hearing a Lance Armstrong is stopped.
Flat tyre. It's a flat tyre at the back. There's no panic. Look at that. He's not panicking at all. The mechanic was sitting on the edge of his seat all the time. Armstrong's back wheel is in. Very quickly changed. His teammates, I would think, will stop immediately and wait for Armstrong. In fact, it's very much like the mechanics got him up and running. He's up and riding. Let's not forget, it was Armstrong's team that was doing the majority of the pacemaking in that group. This is the instant. Armstrong, no panic. You see how he took the wheel out himself, waited for the mechanic to come alongside. Quick stretch of the back. He's had a hard day in the saddle.
Well, this is amazing, but Armstrong in absolutely no panic. His whole team will start to ease up here as they now start to pick up one rider pacing him back. Well, as Paul said, the driving power of the race is being done by Armstrong's bunch. If they turn off, I'm just wondering if the others will try and move. They won't be thought too well of if they do attack him when he's had a flat tyre. but still, you never know. We'll see if we get our cameras to the front shortly.
I don't think there are too many riders in that group who've got the firepower to actually ride away from Armstrong and the 4 teammates that he's got. Let's just make that point. It is very important in a bike race to have a lot of teammates around you at all times. His team was the strongest team represented in that leading group. The fact is they're already in the cars, the chasing cars, so they should be back in that main group in a very short period of time.
Yes, and here is the other end here, and it looks as though nobody has turned on the gas. It looks like Levi Leipheimer might be on the front here, on the left of our picture. They're all looking over. They've wondered what's happened to everybody from US Postal, all missing off the front, and they're just continuing to freewheel. So there's no attack against Armstrong. A Richard Virenque on the front now, on the left-hand side, as they continue on the descent. 3:46 behind the 2 leaders.
So Armstrong picking his way here through the convoy of cars at the back, wearing number 1. It looks as if it was Chechu Rubiera who stopped and waited for him, but there's no panic, picking his way through nice and calmly. I think as soon as he had that flat tire, it was US Postal Service who just cut off the effort at the front end of the main field, and that's why the main field is not quite hammering along as fast as it was a few moments before. He didn't panic at all. He was nice and calm and collected when that happened. And you can just hear probably the ambient sound of the cars hitting their horns. That is just to warn the car in front that there's a rider coming through the convoy. Sometimes there's so much going on in the team car that the team manager might be looking at the television, listening to the mechanic, doing something else, and he might forget for a moment to look in his rear-view mirror. So the horn just reminds him.
Well, that all happened at 38 kilometers to go for Lance Armstrong, and the race didn't go away from him. He's now back in the bunch, and he'll cut his way through. It was amazing there, Paul. Absolutely no panic. I thought he'd get on the roadside and do a full stretch for a moment.
The thing about a real professional bike rider is you cannot panic. If the rider himself starts to panic in a moment like that, that panic actually gets taken across to the mechanic. Because the mechanic then, if he sees the rider is nervous, gets just a little bit more nervous himself, and it takes him that bit longer to get the wheel in. Now look at this. Armstrong took the wheel out, threw it out of the way so that it didn't hamper the progress of the mechanic, and then what happened after that was he got straight back into the race. Meanwhile, Phil, none of this has any effect on what is happening at the front end of the bike race, except for the fact that the advantage of the 2 leaders has crept up to 3 minutes and 52 seconds.
Yeah, a slight advantage, a slight stay of execution, I would suggest now, looking at the faces here of Rasmussen and Jens Voigt. They're absolutely scorching under the sun, don't forget. And we're running now into what is the last 35 kilometers of the day. The group behind Armstrong's group now has swelled up to 31 riders. There it is from the helicopter. And they're all back together again. There's another big group getting on from the back now, so it's probably more than 31 riders. The yellow jersey of Thomas VOECKLER has come back to the front, which is what you feel when you're in the race leader's yellow jersey. You should be seen near the front of the bunch, and he is back in the group. And it's status quo now because US Postal, led by George Hincapie, have got themselves back into the driving seat of the train.
Well, I think Armstrong will actually have found himself an extra teammate in this group as well, because a little earlier I'd also seen that Manuel Beltran was riding alongside the yellow jersey, so I suspect he has reintegrated the group as well. Number 61, this is the leader of Team CSC. His previous performances in the Tour de France have been 11th overall a couple of years ago when he was the best young rider. Last year he finished 7th overall. And strangely enough, his team manager, Giancarlo Ferretti, didn't want to keep him on board. He said, what's the point of paying a lot of money for a bike rider who doesn't win races? Well, I wonder what he has to say about that performance yesterday, because not only did he respond to the attack of Lance Armstrong, he also accelerated past Armstrong in the last 50 meters of the race to take a very good and dominant victory. Maybe
we'll be treated to a reenactment on the climb up to the finish today, because the climb today is much, much harder than the climb to La Mongie yesterday. It's a question of whether these boys have got any strength left or appetite even for the finish today, because they've had a hard day.
Well, Carlos Sastre in this group as well for Team CSC. For a moment there, you could just see that, in fact, the winner of yesterday's stage, Ivan Basso, was completely isolated. Now, if he'd had a flat tire, there wouldn't have been anybody alongside to pace him back into the group, which just goes to exaggerate why it's important in a race like the Tour de France to have a strong team alongside you at all times.
Well, we just caught a glimpse of the face there of Thomas VOECKLER. He looks pretty cool again now. He's recomposed himself. There's Rubiera. He seems to be the bottle carrier on the team. He's been back again to collect all the bidons. There they are in his back pocket. And now it's a little matter of lifting the pace and getting up to the front and distribute them to the boys who are doing all of the work. There's Basso, just having a chat there with his teammate Carlos Sastre. Sastre had a great race here a couple of years ago, so you must have to watch out there. Most of the riders that matter are here, but I've not seen HERAS. We saw him get dropped and he hasn't come back. There is ULLRICH, who again gives nothing away. We never know quite how this man is feeling. He never seems to go out of position, but he showed us yesterday he cracked big time. So he is looking forward to perhaps a better day today. Andreas Kloden is here, and his teammate also Giuseppe Guerini. 3 T-Mobile boys in this group.
I don't know if you caught a glimpse of that drink that Jan Ullrich is taking on board there. That's one of the most popular drinks among the professional bike riders. It's a very high calorific drink. It's actually disgusting to try and taste, but it contains a lot of carbohydrates for a rider. In a situation like this, it's the ideal moment to take it on board. It probably contains around about 650 calories, which is probably why Jan Ullrich is taking it on board just now. He needs to get a lot of calories into his body for the final climb of the day. 10 miles of climbing up to the summit of the Plateau de Bay, and he doesn't want to go through what he went through yesterday.
17 kilometers, or just over 10 miles, to the bottom of the final climb of the day. We just coursed through this valley. The gap continuing to open. Can't believe this yet again. It's gone out now to 4 minutes 16. The race preoccupied with the puncture of Lance Armstrong. These are the 2 leaders, absolute heroes today, to go past storming like they have done. They went away at 30 kilometers. Rasmussen caught them up at 63 kilometers, but since then we've dropped Chavanel, who's now been passed, and these 2 now clear on their own by 4 minutes and 16 seconds, and they're 32 kilometers from the finish. If it were to be successful, then Voigt would have been ahead of the race for 140 kilometers today.
Rasmussen started the day almost 5 minutes behind Lance Armstrong in the overall classification, so was never really regarded as a threat to taking the overall lead, which is probably why he's been given this certain amount of liberty. But what impresses me about this Danish bike rider who came across to the sport of road racing from mountain biking is he actually told the Danish press that he was going to attack on the 2 big mountain stages, and he felt that this day was much more in his capacity than the previous day, and I think that's proving to be the case, because this has been an unbelievably long escapade. So just looking here at Voigt, and you can see there that those 2 riders are continuing to increase their advantage, and they'll be looking to try and increase it all the way down to the final climb of the day. And I think what will be treated to then is a big chase down towards the finish of the 2 leaders and the main field containing Lance Armstrong, Jan Ullrich, Ivan Basso, and all the other main contenders. And then it's just a question of how much energy have they used throughout the afternoon, and how much have they got left just to get their bodies up to the top of this climb, because that is what it's going to be a case of for the 2 men at the front of the race. It's going to be really a case of survival, just managing to drag their bodies up there. And it would be a fabulous performance for Jens Voigt, the man in 2nd position there. If he was the man to get the victory on a mountain stage, I don't think he really would have ever dreamed about that. Again, a lot of these little towns that we're starting to meander through here are very much abandoned, because I think nearly all of the spectators have moved away from the valley roads here to get themselves up onto the slope of this final climb of the day. There's Armstrong, Acevedo just behind him. The rule here, I think, is the 3 men at the front. Floyd Landis, followed by George Hincapie, followed by Chechu Rubiera, will set the pace on the flatter part of the course. And then once we get to the climb, Jose Acevedo, who's sitting behind Armstrong there in 5th position in that line of blue riders, will then take up the pace making for the first few kilometers of the Plateau de Bay.
Well, Les Cabanes is the name of the town, which strikes fear into the heart of the riders, because that's when they make the right turn and start the climb of the Plateau de Bay. That is going to be a toughie for them, to say the least. It is a cruel, cruel climb. It is lined with thousands and thousands of people, and it must be very embarrassing. At least they'll feel it is if they are shattered. What is Iban Mayo going to do? Because he'll get to that climb probably the best part of 20 minutes behind the leaders today. And believe me, he's done his best. He almost stopped cycling today, and they persuaded him to go on.
Well, I think he did abandon. He just psychologically abandoned the Tour de France, and his teammate Julian Gorospe, who himself in fact raced the Tour de France on a number of occasions in the team of Pedro Delgado and Miguel Indurain, came alongside him and said, don't do it, carry on, this is the Tour de France. You're not completely wiped out physically, it's just a psychological problem you're going through at the moment. Keep in the race. There are so many Spanish fans at the top of the climb here. You need to do it and stay in the race for them.
Let's look at this now. US Postal got themselves down to doing their job, just pacemaking the squad again. The Maillot Jaune put himself in the right position, about 5 men down. These two riders, the gap just started to reverse again a little bit. It's 4 minutes 11 seconds now. These guys have got to be so tired. So tired, and yet they've still got 9 miles or 15 kilometers of the steepest climb of the day to come. Rasmussen, a brave man today, because he put in a huge attack yesterday, and he's taken an awful long gamble today. I thought he was absolutely crazy when he tried to catch the two leaders alone. It took him 30 kilometers of chasing, but he did catch the two leaders on the climb of the Col de Porte d'Aspet, and since then we've lost, of course, Chavanel.
It certainly was a very impressive move by Rasmussen to ride across the gap, and I agree that I didn't think he was going to be able to do it. I thought he was going to stay halfway across the gap. His advantage came when he got onto the slopes of the Col de Porte d'Aspet, because there he reduced a 1.5 minute gap to catching the riders in front, Chavanel and Voigt, just at the summit of the Col de Porte d'Aspet, and that's when the leading group of 3 formed. But these two men then have continued to build up on their advantage, and they've kept it around about the 4 minute mark for a very long time. The maximum they got, by the way, was 5 minutes and 23 seconds. The front end of this group has been led since around about the first climb of the day at the Col de Porte d'Aspet by the blue train of Lance Armstrong. They've done all of the work, but hats off to this man. The yellow jersey, the shoulders on a man who we hardly ever talked about before the start of the Tour de France. This young man here, Thomas VOECKLER, 25 on the 22nd of June this year. The week after his birthday, he won the French National Championships, and 2 weeks after that, he got the yellow jersey.
Richard Virenque's had a great day, increasing his lead over everyone in the King of the Mountains, snicking the 4th place on 5 occasions behind the breakaway. And now just settling down for a final assault on the final stage at the Plateau de Baille. It'll be interesting to see here. I think it'll be more or less a free-for-all of riders who will try to get the day's win, who won't affect Lance Armstrong, and hope that he won't counter their moves. But I'm sure in this group there are riders here like Christophe Moreau, possibly even Richard Virenque, who will try to go again here and win the day. Mancebo, I think, will also try, but I think he's a little bit too close to Armstrong to be allowed much of his head. We spiral around the beauty of the area here, the chateau here. This is the ruins of the Castle Lagarde, and this I think was built about 1215, so that makes it a 13th century castle.
A long time ago. It was actually demolished during the French Revolution. I think they knocked down quite a few of the chateaux in those times, and that was around about the end of the 1700s. 200 years ago, the French decided to knock a few of their wonderful chateaux forts, the French word for castle, down. And that one was one of the ones that has been left in ruins ever since. These two guys aren't looking at the scenery, they're not looking at the sights, they're just trying actually probably not to look upwards either towards the sky, because right in front of them is the very big climb of the Plateau de Baille. They're going along the valley road right now. They've been through the small town of Nio, and now they are just getting themselves ready for what is going to be the final big ascent. And I think it's going to be a pursuit race up the slopes of this mountain, because I think there'll be some serious reactions in the main field, and they will just hope that they can conserve a certain amount of their advantage charging up towards the top.
Well, they look to be going as quick as ever here, but in fact they're being caught at 3 minutes and 46 seconds. They're riding down the main highway in this area, which goes right through to Andorra, but it's closed today for the Tour de France. No idea how you get to Andorra, because this road is shut for 6 hours and there's no other way into the Principality from France in this region. But they are riding down at the moment. 3 minutes 50 is what they're telling us as I speak. And behind, the riders now are all assembling around the blue jerseys of US Postal. And slipping to the back, but it doesn't look to be in any trouble. I think he's looking for a drink, possibly. Thomas VOECKLER. Oh, he's having a chat there with one of the riders on the Lotto team. He's had a marvellous day, even so. He goes to the foot of the plateau, the Plateau de Dubai, still as the leader of the Tour de France. How many times have we seen him do this? Now he sprints off the back and goes back to take his position up the front. Unbelievable.
Exactly what he's going to have to do. And by the way, if you'd been following the Tour de France and you knew that it was on and you wanted to go to Andorra, well, you'd have to go round and come in by the gateway from Spain, and that's an awful long detour. And if you got caught out and didn't know the Tour de France was on, well, you just have to sit at the side of the road for 6 hours.
Well, at least you can enjoy the spectacle of the passage of the Tour de France, and that's always the way. There's Floyd Landis now. His job has been great in this tour, here for one man, and that's Lance Armstrong, of course, doing a great job. These two boys are heading down towards the sprint. They're just coming into Ornolac, and there'll be a small time bonus sprint here that neither of them worried about it, of course. It may be Voigt will get it. If he does, well, it'll be his first prize of the day in first place.
Unbelievable. Huge crowd turned out here as well in this very small town of Ornolac. They've just been through a very nice, pretty town called Usac-les-Bains, which they went through at 24 kilometers to go. They've got a long flat road to go along here before they get to the final climb of the day, and it is basically completely flat for around about 8 kilometers now. And then once they get to the end of this long valley road, they'll take a turn to the right, and then they'll go right up the side of the valley which they've been going along. And it really does start to dig in then, because it's a long climb, 10 miles of climbing. 25
kilometers to go. They've just gone under the banner. They know the last 15 are all uphill, so they are just 10 kilometers away. Jens Voigt, we've seen him in front of our television cameras in these low moves ever since day 2 of the Tour de France, which was in fact stage 1 on the road. And ever since then, he's been a great attacking rider. You'll never slow it down. I often wonder why Crédit Agricole, the team he left last year, let him go, because he's such a valuable bike rider to any team.
Well, I also wonder why they let go Stuart O'Grady as well. And both of those riders, since they've left the team, have had a very successful year this season. Stuart O'Grady got himself a day in the green jersey, and he got himself a stage victory too. And Jens Voigt has had a brilliant year so far this season, riding for the team CSC from Denmark.
Well, as they arrive at the sprint, which is not so important to any of them, just let me remind you, there are 4 categories in the Tour de France, and they're all wearing a coloured jersey. The yellow jersey, the most important, still being worn by Thomas Voeckler as we go towards the Plateau de Dubai. Also, he leads in the white jersey for the best rookie, which is being worn by Sandy Cassar at the moment. Richard Virenque's had a great day in his polka dot jersey for King of the Mountains. And Robbie McEwen, by the way, the wearer of the green sprint jersey, he hates the mountains, but then that's why they brought in the green jersey in 1953. That was for the riders who couldn't climb the mountains, intended for the best sprinter. And at the moment, Robbie McEwen is in a big group behind the main field, but they won't be eliminated because there are too many of them together. But I think today, Paul, it'll be around 35 minutes behind before they come home.
It might be even, but yeah, 35 minutes for those guys. And I think the elimination time will be close to 50 or 55 minutes on a stage that roughly is going to be around about a 5.5 hour stage for this 205 kilometers the riders have raced. No contest at all as they go through the sprint point. Jens Voigt gets the maximum points there ahead of Rasmussen, but not too worried about that. You can see sharing the pacemaking now. This is going to be a very important 10 kilometers for these riders. That sprint point there is at 23 kilometers to go. In 7 kilometers they will begin at the Plateau de Dubai, and that is going to be the very difficult part of the course for these riders, because it will be completely and utterly uphill, and that is going to be rather difficult for them, because they have been at the front of the race for 30 kilometers. 170 kilometers in the lead is going to really put paid to a lot of the energy left in the thighs.
It's going to be so tough here. This is the main field here as we head to Tarascon-sur-Ariège. This is a beautiful town here, almost the last town before you go through and on towards Andorra. But the riders today, of course, they will arrive just short of Aix-les-Thermes, and then they'll make a sharp right and turn their backs on that spa town and climb up to the plateau. There are thousands of people here. They put warnings out on the radio 48 hours before the race was due to say, you know, you better start thinking of looking for somewhere else to see the Tour de France, because there are so many people on this climb. And there is the group still in charge of the US Postal. This is a great day, Paul, for one Levi Leipheimer, because he's having a wonderful race again.
He certainly is. Before the start of the Tour de France, we were talking about the second American being Tyler Hamilton. Well, Hamilton has abandoned the race this afternoon. He's had a lot of problems since the start. He's been involved in a number of accidents. But Levi Leipheimer has ridden from strength to strength. He started the day in 12th place in the overall classification, around about 3.5 minutes behind Lance Armstrong. But with a good finishing climb here today, he could see himself climb up into the top 10 in the overall classification. And let's not forget, a couple of years ago, he announced to the world that he was a good time trial, a good 3-week bike race rider by finishing 3rd in the Vuelta a España, the first time an American got onto the podium in that race, and finishing 8th in the overall race at the Tour de France.
That's absolutely right. So the gap, by the way, at 25 kilometers was 3 minutes and 25 seconds there. There's the maillot jaune, best of the rest of the riders, but it's all US Postal right now who continue to drive this train. David Moncoutier, number 97, and behind him, Ivan Basso, the 2-stage winners of the recent past of this week's Tour de France. Into USA now. This is USA Demine as they continue on towards the big showdown. Continuing very, very fast, rapid pace now. 182 kilometers covered of the 205 scheduled.
Main field now also in the same town of the sprint, the town of Ornalac. Just saw the leading group of 2 go through there just a few moments ago. Their advantage 3 minutes and 24 seconds. Once again, in this group, you can start to feel the nervous nature of the approach to this final climb of the day. These guys on the front, Floyd Landis, Hincapie, Chechu Rubiera and Armstrong, are just getting themselves into the zone, concentrated completely and utterly on the job in hand. On the 5th position there, you can see the man who has been an absolutely superb star, I think, for the team since the start of the season, the Portuguese rider, Jose Acevedo. Armstrong is going to count on him now.
Here are the 2 leaders now, and there's the forest ahead. We'll be going right round the edge of that, and then we'll begin our climb. 20 kilometers still to go for the leaders. There's the banner across the road. They had at 25 kilometers, 3:25 the gap.
Once they go under that banner, that is 4 kilometers to the small town of Les Cabanes, and that's when the climb will start. 20 kilometers to go. They are really going to have to charge up to the line if they're going to survive, but it's going to be very, very close.
Behind the riders is the 20 kilometer to go arch across the road, which puts us 5 kilometers from the start of the final climb of what has been an horrendous day. Top riders have abandoned the Tour de France. Top riders are behind the leading group in the Tour de France. 2 riders lead at the moment, and Lance Armstrong seems to be in control. But the leader of the Tour, Thomas VOECKLER, has fought and fought. He keeps coming back to the side of Armstrong. He is going to the final climb of the day, still the leader of the Tour de France. And I have to say, the artists here in France are something special.
They're really turning out the style for the Tour de France this year, and they're being rewarded by a brilliant performance by a young Frenchman by the name of Thomas VOECKLER. Because, Phil, I think the amazing thing about this young Frenchman, he's been dropped on every climb of the day since we left. After 42 kilometers and he hit the first climb, he was dropped. And every time he's fought himself back into the race to stay in contact. He's going to have a hard time on this final climb of the day, because climbing up to the Plateau de Bay is a brute of a climb. It's 16 kilometers in length. Its average gradient is 7.8, but there are a couple of points where it's very close to 10%, and that's where we'll see some riders throwing out the sandbags, I think.
It's going to be horrendous showdown on the Plateau de Bay today. Remember, this is only the hors d'oeuvres of the mountains when we leave the Pyrenees. Tomorrow, a flashy stage will take us to the lovely Roman city of Nîmes, and then a rest day. And they'll need that, because after the rest day, we race up to the Alps, and we have an horrendous few days in the Alps before we go to the final time trial at Besançon, and then the final showdown, of course, when we'll all arrive on the Champs-Élysées. I'm not sure how many guys are going to get there right now, because we've lost a few today. We're down to 160 now, and there's still the big mountains of the Alps to come, so it could be a small field going up to the Champs-Élysées. This man, I hope, is among them. He will go home to Paris a total hero, whatever happens in the next few minutes, because he's led the Tour for 8 days. He's fought himself right back in. He still goes to the final climb of 15 kilometers with 5 minutes in hand over Armstrong. And Paul and I both agree, if he leads tonight, he'll lead us to the Alps.
He certainly will. That's all he's got to do, but it's going to be a real tough effort. He's done an unbelievable job. I cannot believe the number of times that he's actually pulled himself back into the race, having been dropped on 6 occasions so far today, and pulling himself back to the group of Armstrong. So this is it. This is the final climb as they go through there. The little town you just saw with the line through it was Les Cabanes. So the 2 leaders now are on the final climb of the day.
That gives them just 15 kilometers to go. They get to it first. They've been away for 13 kilometers from the start. Now it's up to them. Can they make it to the top?
It's going to be hard. Rasmussen, I think the better climber of the 2, but after a long breakaway, it's very strange how the body reacts. Jens Voigt, a much bigger, thicker set bike rider, a real punchy style for Jens Voigt. If I cast my mind back, I think he's been in this situation before on a mountain stage and got dropped on the final ascent up towards a climb. A little bit of adjustment there to the shoes. The shoes, as you can see, are clipped to the pedals with a kind of ski binding. You can clip them out just exactly the same way as you can with a set of ski boots, but the shoes themselves are actually tightened and slackened with a Velcro fastener. And I think what Rasmussen was doing there, after having them fairly slack for the majority of the stage to make sure that his feet don't get too hot in this climate, was actually tightening them up for the final climb of the day. Race referee moving out. The last time check we got, by the way, to the leading group of riders with Armstrong and the yellow jersey, Thomas VOECKLER, is now down to 2 minutes and 35 seconds. It's going to be a huge race. They're leaving Caban as well. Floyd Landis has done an absolutely fabulous job. He won himself 2 races himself so far this season. One of them was a stage, the big mountain stage of the Tour of the Algarve, and he took himself, as well as that, the overall classification too.
Well, I also have to hand it to Jens Voigt, Paul, because you look at his face, this man is driving all of the time. 9.1 miles to go, or just on 15 kilometers to the end of today's stage. It is all uphill, even when you cross the finishing line to where your car is parked. And now we're on the Plateau de Bailly, and coming into the town of Les Cabanes before they start the turn to go right are the team of US Postal, led by George Hincapie, Floyd Landis. They're running into the final approach now, 2 minutes 25 seconds down. What is the yellow jersey thinking down there? He's got to stay closer to Lance Armstrong. If he goes back 5 minutes, he'll lose his lead. There is Armstrong driving like he's never driven before. He is an amazing cyclist.
I think you know what the riders think about riding uphill with helmets on, because as soon as they got to the bottom of the climb there, all helmets were taken off by all of the riders in this leading group. Rules nowadays in international cycling say if the final climb of the day is more than 5 kilometers, you can remove your helmet. I think that is Floyd Landis swinging off here. He's done a fabulous job. A quick tap on the shoulder. It must have been Floyd Landis, because Levi Leipheimer there just tapped him on the back to say, good job, well done. I'll see you tonight, and we can talk about it all over in the bar.
Well, it's amazing. It's mano a mano, everybody against each other. Yet when it comes to the end, they talk to each other about how tough it was and how hard it was, and it was each other who caused all of the pain. And I'm just wondering here now if there is a bit of a split going on here. This is at the back of the race, and it's Richard Virenque. I really thought he might have tried to win today, but on the lower slopes, Virenque immediately has eased up and looks as though he's dropping back. He knows there's a tough week ahead, and he's thinking only of a record number of victories in that King of the Mountains jersey. So he's turning away here, double points on the last climb of the day.
No, I'm not sure that he could actually think about possibly finishing in the top 10 on a stage like this. I think he's looking here at sense being the better part of valor, and thinking about the fact that we're facing up now to what is going to be a very difficult last week of the Tour de France, and he knows that there's going to be some big battles in the Alps to come. We've got one flat stage tomorrow, and then a big heavy menu of mountains in the Alps. On the front there is the yellow jersey just sitting on the wheel of Lance Armstrong. Armstrong's team is still looking exceptionally strong. Riders being tailed off at the back end of the group. Chechu Rubiera doing the job now, moving forward into the next position is Jose Acevedo. I was looking to see if I could see George Hincapie, but he too must have disappeared from the fold.
I think that was also his final ride of the day, and now here's the Phonak rider Oscar Sevilla, and I thought he might have gone up with him, but he looks as though he also has been detached here. So Sevilla, who rode very well yesterday, is now being dropped. We hit the climb in a group of 35 riders, and now already it is becoming an elite group. Back up to the leaders here. This is Rasmussen, and with him is Jens Voigt. They're looking at 13.8 kilometers to go, and it gets harder, not easier.
2 minutes and 4 seconds advantage over the front end of the chase. The front end of the chase is led by Lance Armstrong and his US Postal Service team. The man who is doing a brilliant job on the day is on the right-hand shoulder there of Lance Armstrong. As you can see here, a little bit further down, riders just trying to survive. That's Laurent Brochard there trying to fight his way back into the group. And it looks to me as if here there's a rider from Quickstep, I think, just must have had a mechanical incident, because that's Juan Miguel Mercado riding his way up through the field.
White jersey of Sandy Cassar here, third overall. He's going.
Problem.
There is a switch in tyre. Christophe Moreau trying to change wheels here with a teammate, and it looked to me as though the teammate there was probably, it couldn't have been Torhushoff, surely.
Bocharov.
Oh, Bocharov. Russian rider Bocharov. This is a slow change. They could have done both bikes.
This is always the worrying thing at the bottom of a climb. Christophe Moreau had ridden so well, it's taking him forever. And if actually you can see, the problem is the team mechanic of this team is so far back in the convoy of cars that he can't actually get here. The team mechanic will arrive now, but that's the important thing of having a good team, being high in the overall classification, because your team car in the order of cars is much closer to the front, can come up alongside very easily. The big problem there, let me just explain, these riders were on separate machines. He has got a very special bike for the mountains today, and I think Bocharov didn't have exactly the same size of the rear end of his bike, which is why they had to adjust the rear mechanism.
Well, that's a shame for both of them, because I think they're both out of it now. They're not going to tempo ride back up to these. As we could see there was a whole different ball game going on. Sandy Cassar, third overall, has been dropped. The maillot jaune is still there and looking a lot better than he did on the previous big climbs. And remember, he's got to finish ahead of Sandy Cassar, or at least not too far behind him, to move into the white jersey, should he crack and pass the yellow to Armstrong. Richard Virenque now settling down to a long and lonely climb. He's not worried. He's saving his energy for bigger things.
Now there's a move here, acceleration coming from AG2R at the front of the group ahead of Lance Armstrong. Now this was something I did not expect to see anybody from AG2R going out on the attack.
Well, it's either Asta Loza or Yuri Kritsov, and we'll find out which one it is in a moment. But that's the attack there, and causing no reaction from the boys from US Postal. I think this is what we expected today. Lance hasn't had any reason to attack, because all of the riders seem to be destroying themselves down there.
Jan Ullrich is there. You can just see the pink jersey of T-Mobile creeping in every now and again. The maillot jaune at the back, the maillot jaune, the yellow jersey, has been dropped from the Armstrong group. Now he mustn't panic. If he wants to stay in the yellow jersey tonight, he's got to get into a rhythm and just ride at his own pace, and only that way can he limit his losses.
And Axel Merckx has gone. There's the maillot jaune now. Axel Merckx has just gone. Rick Verbrugge has just gone. They're both behind him. He needs to just ride sensibly now and just hope he can limit his losses to 5 minutes on Lance Armstrong. If he can't, he must also stay clear of Sandy Cassar. At least he'll continue in this race as the best rookie, and surely he deserves that.
Well, the time gap coming over race radio right now has been reduced again. It's 1 minute and 25 seconds from the leading group of two back to the Lance Armstrong group. Chechu Rubiera here doing a fabulous job.
Yes, indeed. Rubiera now taking over the job. We can expect Jose Acevedo to come up and do that next as they continue to climb. Ullrich is still there, and so too is Andreas Clouden as they continue the climb here. 1 minute 41 now to the leaders. They're not going to survive, and we've got nearly 13 kilometers to go to the top.
Two more riders being dropped from this group, Cauchioli and Simoni.
So they were looking down now on a group which was 35 at the bottom, has now reduced to just about a dozen, and not included now, just having been dropped here and picking up a teammate, and it's Sylvain Chavanel here still finding legs from somewhere, and that's the yellow jersey of VOECKLER. Moreau has had a wheel change. He's slowly picking his way through. He's up with Laurent Brochard on the right there now, as he comes up to Bocharov, who gave him the wheel, is still riding with him. Oh no, that was Patrice Algan on the right. That's another teammate. So Crédit Agricole had 3 men up here till the problem started.
What this man has to do now, not panic, try and get into a rhythm, use his teammate to approach him up to the groups and then make his way up through the groups. But the way he was riding this afternoon, he could have stayed with them for an awful long time. There's just 15 seconds now separating the yellow jersey from the Lance Armstrong group. So the yellow jersey is doing a fabulous job once again. But as I said, what he needs to do is not panic, just ride at a nice, comfortable pace. Michele Scarponi just there going off the back.
So Michele Scarponi, we've just passed Juan Miguel Mercado, has just gone by us now as they continue to split up. Carlos Sastre, who's always ridden well on the climb of the Plateau de Baille, he's also now in trouble. Remember, we're climbing up here to the high spot of 1,780 meters. It has been an horrendously long day in the saddle, and this is the hardest climb of them all. It does level out, or it doesn't level out, but you get into open spaces on the top. But the Plateau de Baille, with an average grade of 8.6, 8.7%, is going to hurt them all now. And the Maillot Jaune is beginning to lose ground, but he hasn't forgotten how to fight. He is trying to hold on to the back wheel now of his teammate Sylvain Chavanel. When we get to the end of today, we will have covered 205 kilometers. And still Armstrong has never attacked Paul. It's the others can't go with him.
Just allowing his teammates to do the work. He's waiting to see if any challenge is going to come from the other riders in this group. It's not really his responsibility to attack. It's his responsibility to defend and see if anybody else wants to move away from him. There on the left-hand side of him, there is the man who was the winner of yesterday's stage. Levi Leipheimer is still in the group. He's going to move up to being the second American here in the bike race here this afternoon. Ullrich was also there very comfortably. Armstrong, I feel, has the advantage because he's still got two very strong teammates up alongside him. Chechu Rubiera, Jose Luis is his proper name, but his nickname is Chechu, and of course Jose Acevedo, I think the revelation of US Postal Service this year. There is the yellow jersey, around about 20 seconds now behind the group of Armstrong. Just sit back, relax, enjoy the ride to the summit if you can, at your own tempo, because otherwise, if he tries to stay in contact with the Armstrong group, he knows that he would absolutely blow.
Yes, and if he can just hold 5 minutes 20 seconds, he'll still be in yellow tomorrow, and that's important. It's a flat day tomorrow. He'll recover and he won't lose his lead. Armstrong won't attack him on a flat stage. He could take us to the Alps. Well, I think I've worked out who's left here. Armstrong, Azevedo, Rubiera, Ullrich is here, Cloden is here, Pereiro is still here, Ivan Basso, Francesco Mancebo, Tochnig, Stefan Gruber of AG2R, and that's, I think, the rider who attacked, and he's back in now, and Levi Leipheimer, 151, right in the center of our picture.
Leipheimer is in a very good position here tactically because he's got a man up the road after the big long breakaway of Michael Rasmussen. But look at the time difference between these two riders at the front and the group of Armstrong. It is now down to just 44 seconds. This final climb of the day is going to put the last nail into the coffin of the breakaway companions.
And still, as Morrow now has come up from his flat tyre, this man has still found his legs to kick on those pedals. He's trying to hang on to Morrow now. And that has been a fabulous piece of riding by Christophe Moreau. He is sitting on some great form this year.
This is actually going to be an advantage to the young man in the yellow jersey there. And I think what is fabulous about the sport of cycling, if you look at the people encouraging him at the side of the road, they are Spanish, French, and any nationality you'd like to conjure up.
We are looking at the face of Christophe Moreau, who is riding himself back up towards the Armstrong group right now. After his wheel change, he's just gone past the Maillot Jaune of Thomas VOECKLER. Moreau still sits 14 minutes almost off the race lead, so he's no big danger, but he's having such a good tour, he could climb up towards a podium place. There's the Maillot Jaune. If he doesn't concede 5 minutes to Lance Armstrong, he will keep his yellow jersey. He's 11 kilometers to hang on.
You've really got to encourage this young man, and he really has to not panic. That's the important thing. He cannot rival Armstrong. He cannot even rival Christophe Moreau, who he stayed with for a couple of 100 meters, but wasn't able to accept the punishing pace that the Frenchman was setting. He just needs to hope that he doesn't lose 5 minutes and 20 seconds before the top of this climb. His teammate, once again, up alongside him, pacing him nice and slowly, encouraging him. Psychologically, this is a big advantage to have somebody alongside you. The two leaders now looking a bit ragged.
I am not surprised. They're only half a minute in front of the race now as they try to hold them off. But really, I don't think they can possibly do that now. The spread is only a minute 21. Now, what's happened there? Ullrich is hanging. Ullrich is sitting on the back wheel there. And going off his Rubiera, he's done his stuff. Ullrich isn't looking at all good here, and remember, it is just hard tempo riding. I think the elastic has broken because Leipheimer is on the left and Stefan Goubert is there as well. Well, it looks as though Ullrich is cracking again and Kloden is not.
Now look at this. They're turning up the final screw is the man who came into the US Postal Service team during the winter months, the man who goes by the name of Jose Acevedo. Jens Voigt has realized he's going to get caught. He sat up and decided not to stay with Michael Rasmussen anymore, but there is not very much time difference between this lone leader and the front end of the group. Armstrong and his team now turning up the screw just as they did 2 years ago on the slopes of this very climb. But you know, before it was a man by the name of Roberto HERAS. This man is doing exactly the same job. He's condemning Leipheimer, he's condemning Jan Ullrich into the position of former challengers.
Well, I'm just looking up there now as Ullrich again is paying the price somewhere down the line. He hasn't got himself fit enough for this year's Tour de France. But we could be seeing the same 1-2 as yesterday because Basso is marking Armstrong and they could be the only two left if this stays on.
Well, Tochnig is the rider in the leading group with Armstrong in the pale blue jersey, just staying in contention as well. He was actually looking fairly comfortable, and sitting on the shoulder of Lance Armstrong was the man who won the stage yesterday, Ivan Basso, looking nice and comfortable. Now, Armstrong now has caught Jens Voigt. Voigt is in the group for a little while, and he'll have the chance to witness what the big men of the Tour de France look like on the final kilometers of one of these slopes.
So just about 10 kilometers from the finish, Voigt is swept up. It won't be long before Rasmussen is too, as Acevedo, again the last survivor, pacing Lance Armstrong here, then just Armstrong to make the move. There it is. The catch is over. What is left of the peloton, it's hardly a peloton, we've got 5 riders here, and now Acevedo is taking Lance Armstrong to victory here on the Plateau de Bailly. There's only a couple of riders will get in the way, and they are the same men who got in the way yesterday. Andreas Kloden and Ivan Basso, the only two to match Armstrong again.
You've got to question Jan Ullrich and the fact that he has this inability to control his body weight during the season. He put a lot of weight on in the early part of this season, and before the Tour de France lost himself 5 kilos in the last month before the event came up. Now that cannot be good for the body, that's absolutely certain. Just looking down there, you can see Andreas Kloden. He's alongside Francisco Mancebo, the man who in fact is the leader of the Spanish Balearic Islands team. And now the Spanish spectators getting right behind Lance Armstrong there. Acevedo from Portugal doing a brilliant job for Lance Armstrong. Look at the face of Armstrong, complete and utter concentration, not at all worried.
Well, Ivan Basso said yesterday he had a good day, but he didn't know whether he would have another good day. Well, I guess we know the answer now.
He's having a good day. Don't be too surprised about this man. He's got a very good association with the Tour de France. The first year he rode the Tour, he was riding high up in the overall classification. I think on that occasion he was actually leading the white jersey competition. He crashed on the road into Colmar on the 14th of July as Laurent Jalabert was winning the bike race. He then came back a year later, finished 11th overall and won himself the white jersey. Last year he was 7th overall. This year I think he's going to be just a little bit closer.
Well, he's found something special now. Basso has started the day in 6th place, a 6:33 behind Thomas Voeckler. He's now getting time on him. He could be right up behind the new leader, Lance Armstrong, tonight, if it's going to be that way. 10 kilometers to go. The battle here on the Plateau de Bailly will continue. As we watch now, Lance Armstrong here dripping in sweat, Paul. Did you see the way this guy is unbelievable? The way he just allows his team to do the job. Then he just says, thanks, guys. See you for the champagne tonight at dinner.
Well, you know what? He has built over the last few years the best team in the world. It really is amazing the way the team has changed from the team that he had back in 1999, when people said, what a weak team this US Postal Service is. There's no way they can control Lance Armstrong. There's no way they can defend. Tocznik has gone off the back of the group that he was with just a few moments ago, but he's going to ride a very high place in the overall rankings with a performance like this. But to come back to Armstrong's team, he's built the best team in the world for the month of July. This is a magnificent team that he's got. He has complete and utter confidence in them. They all know their job in the team, and when they come to July, nobody else has any other ambition except to help him win the race.
It is absolutely incredible, and the 5-time winners prior to Lance Armstrong all had a bad 6th tour, but there's no reason now to think that Armstrong will have a bad 6th tour. He is just too good for the field. He is winning this tour these past 2 days without seriously attacking them. They just haven't been able to match the tempo-paced riding of the US Postal team. Look at Ullrich here now. He started the day in 16th place, 9 minutes behind VOECKLER. He is still in front of VOECKLER, but he's a long way behind. Here is VOECKLER now. He's going under 10 to go. At this moment, 10 from the top. He is keeping his race lead.
Keeping his race lead, and he doesn't look like he's weakening at all. It's not a great climbing style that he's got, but it's putting a lot of energy into his ability to try and stay in contact with the yellow jersey. He's losing a bit of time to Acevedo, Armstrong and Basso, but he's only lost 1 minute and 45 seconds. It's still possible that this young man can be in the yellow jersey tonight, but it's going to be very close indeed.
Well, these boys are going to continue to lift the tempo all of the time, I think, and he's going to hang on, but he's still got about 3.5 minutes in hand for the last 10 kilometers. It's possible. Armstrong still happy to ride behind Jose Acevedo here, and just wait for the moment it comes. Then I wonder if Lance will remember yesterday when Ivan Basso beat him to the line, the criticism he got because they said he gave him the stadium, which, by the way, Paul and I are certainly not a party to, because we don't believe it, but we'll see. We'll see if he attacks him. And the return of Tocznik here, who is a bit revitalised man these last couple of years. He was last year's champion of Austria, and he is a very, very good climber. Now he's refound himself a little bit.
National time trial of Austria this season, and certainly a few years ago we thought he was going to be a rider who could finish high in the overall classification. I think we're looking there at number 17, the new leader of T-Mobile, a man who a few years ago won Paris-Nice, an early season stage race in dominating style, and we thought this is the new German star. He vanished for a couple of seasons. This year he seems to have turned over the fold, and he's coming back to the top of the sport. Jan Ullrich, what can you say? This man has been to the Tour de France on 6 occasions. He's won once and he's finished second on 5 occasions. He's going to have a hard time, I think, Phil, this year actually getting second place.
He might have a hard time getting over the mental block of having been so bad on these 2 days in the Pyrenees, and he might not finish the Tour de France at this moment in time. Lance Armstrong has built up his cadence there, and it looks to me now as though he might be building up for his assault on the finish, which is 8.7 kilometers away.
Look at that cadence of his, just a glimpse of it for a few moments there. He's a man who over the last few years has learned to pedal very fast on a bicycle. That has become his secret. Ullrich, on the other hand, pedals very slowly, around about 85 revolutions every minute, but uses a much bigger gear. Armstrong's ability to pedal this very low gear at high revolutions allows him to produce incredibly violent accelerations on the slopes of a climb like this. These are the two chasers, Francisco Mancebo on the front there, the Spanish national champion, and the German national champion, Andreas Kloden, in second place.
So we're looking at the riders here now on the climb of the Plateau de Baille. The whole Tour de France is spread-eagled right across this mountain. This is Georg Tocznik here. Well, there's no change here on the Plateau de Baille. Still up front, setting the pace, is the teammate of Lance Armstrong, Jose Acevedo. But look here now, and this is now Jan Ullrich. He's hit the limit of his ability in this Tour de France this weekend. He is now struggling as he falls further and further behind. The whole of the Tour de France is now climbing in 1s and 2s, and despite any real attack from anybody, the race is disintegrated.
It's all really because of the pressure of one man's team. Look at this, the yellow jersey still all over his machine, digging for every last ounce of little bit of energy he can put into his pedaling style. His pedaling style is not pretty, as if you look at it, the way he's getting out of the saddle is not smooth, but at least it's keeping him in with a chance of holding the yellow jersey for at least a couple more days.
He's riding alongside the Russian rider there, Vladimir Karpits, and he's got somebody to measure his effort against. Never say this man doesn't know pain anyway. He's learned how to suffer this past week, and he's still got a real chance of keeping that yellow jersey for a bit longer, because he went under 10 kilometers, a minute and 45 seconds behind Armstrong, who is the next obvious candidate. This is Philippe Gouvert, who is also riding well, so well he's left the maillot jaune side. He's come up behind Jan Ullrich.
Ullrich now is just going to ride his own personal individual time trial. But don't discount the quality of this bike rider. Armstrong made no bones about the fact that he wanted to go into the final time trial with a huge buffer over Jan Ullrich. Jan Ullrich has the ability to beat some of the riders who are very good in the mountains by 4 or 5 minutes in the final time trial of the Tour de France, which is why right now they are trying to put seriously big time gaps between themselves and this man, who I think could very well be the dominant factor in the latter part of the Tour. But today, he doesn't look like a very strong character.
Unlike the other riders, he rides on the bottom of the handlebars, those massive arms looking more capable of being a weightlifter than the bike riders, but he is such a strong rider, and he is one of the most talented riders, if not the most naturally talented riders in the business. Meanwhile, back at the front, 3 remain, 2 against 1, and Acevedo, to a degree, has a slightly easier task now. The only man behind is Basso, and Armstrong is still with him.
Does this not remind you of something? 2002, there was a 3-man group on the very slopes of this climb, the Plateau de Bay. One was Roberto HERAS, one was Lance Armstrong, and the other one was Yoshiba Belocchi. It's basically a very similar situation. US Postal Service against one man, Ivan Basso, although Georg Tocznik is actually starting to come back.
Tocznik is slowly getting back into the race here, as we're listening here to the gaps at the moment, but we're just waiting to hear the gap of the maillot jaune. We can see if he's hanging on to that yellow jersey for at least one more day.
Well, Georg Tocznik, the guy who is just pulling himself back up to that leading group of 3, actually finished 12th overall in the Tour de France last year. Lots of riders have been put into difficulty here. Ullrich is not that far behind. He's getting into his own rhythm, but look at the monstrous gear he pedals up these slopes compared to the different pedaling style of Lance Armstrong.
14 seconds the gap between Tocznik and the 3 leaders. 56 seconds back to the next men on the road now, who is Ullrich himself. But hey, now it's changed again. The job has been done by Jose Acevedo. He finished off the total destruction of the Tour de France, except one man, and now it's mano a mano, Armstrong and Basso, as it was yesterday. And I don't think today Armstrong will allow Basso to win. She never did yesterday. It just didn't matter so much.
I don't think it was important for him to win yesterday. The important thing was to put time between himself and the other riders in the group. Great job. Jose Acevedo set an unbelievable tempo. His job at the bottom of this climb, and I think he was kept in arrears from the rest of the team over the last few kilometers, was to set the tempo for Armstrong for 3 or 4 kilometers to assassinate all the challengers. And the man who was the biggest casualty is this man in the pink and white here, Jan Ullrich. He's not able to accelerate on a climb as the other riders, the climbers, are. He has to go up there like a big diesel engine. Very slow motion, massive gears, sheer power, but can't respond to the accelerations of men like Acevedo.
He might well catch Acevedo, as this climb still has 7 kilometers to go to the summit. The only 2 men ahead of him, other than Acevedo, are Armstrong and Basso and Georg Tocznik. So there are 4 riders at the moment in front of Ullrich. And here comes Tocznik now. He has passed Acevedo. He's still hanging at around about, well, they're saying 10 seconds now.
Now, you might ask yourself why Jose Acevedo doesn't try and get onto the wheel of Georg Tocznik and get back into the race. His job has been done. He's completely buried himself for his leader, and now he's just going to ride up this climb as easily as he can. It doesn't matter to him if he loses 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, because he has to do this same job again tomorrow and the day after that and the week after that.
Yes, and he sits 11th overall at the moment, Acevedo. Armstrong won't be afraid now to stamp on those pedals. It'll be up to Ivan Basso to try and hold on, and they should stir the pacemaking. We'll see if they do, but right now Armstrong, with every pedal rev, is gaining time. He's eliminating his rivals today in the Tour de France. It could be a week of laps of honor, if you like. The only man looking like a challenger at this stage after 2 days is Basso, and Basso still has a lot of time behind him to make up.
Here you can see Armstrong getting out of the saddle, accelerating further down the slopes. This man is hoping that he can stay in the yellow jersey for one more day, but he's now beginning to lose some big chunks of time. He started the day with a 5-minute and 24-second buffer over Lance Armstrong, and he's already lost around about 50% of that. His teammate still pacing him up the climb, Sylvain Chavanel.
Well, the maillot jaune being paced, as Paul says, by Chavanel. Chavanel has been an absolute hero today as well, in the leading group all day, winning most of the climbs, falling back, looking absolutely dead to the world. He's gone back and he's now helping the leader, Thomas VOECKLER, as Chavanel said he would 48 hours ago. There's the two leaders of the day. We're switching now to La Mongiers, just like it was yesterday, but this is a much harder climb. The weather is hotter, the wind is blowing far stronger, and Lance Armstrong doesn't seem to want any help. He's just got his cadence going. Mancebo and Andreas Clouden here. Between them is still Acevedo, I think, and certainly Thompson.
Very strange style there is Acevedo, just on the right-hand side, on the left-hand side of the road, making his way up. He's just cruising right now. He's done his job for the day. All he wants to do is just get himself up to the finishing line. Francisco Mancebo there, very strange style for this Spanish climber, but it's a very efficient one too, because he's right up and moving himself into 4th position. Now Acevedo decides, I've had a bit of a rest after pacing Lance for about 3 or 4 kilometers. I think I'll ride to the top with these guys.
Well, we're just hearing now, in fact, that Levi Leipheimer is 2 minutes and 15 seconds now behind Lance Armstrong and Ivan Basso. So once the elastic snaps, it snaps at a big time. And remember that Leipheimer is in front of the maillot jaune. This Tour de France has blown apart today. It's been an incredible day. It started with the early abandon of Zubeldia, who finished 5th in this race last year. He has a knee injured in a crash earlier. Denis Menchov, who was the white jersey rookie of last year's Tour, he stopped. Then came the big one with 90 kilometers only ridden today. Tyler Hamilton abandoned the race. Soon after that, this year's winner of the King of the Mountains in the Tour of Italy, Fabian Weckman, went. Then we saw HERAS crash and then later get dropped. And then we also saw the near abandonment of Iban Mayo. He was persuaded to go on, but I suspect he's probably 25 minutes behind right now.
The race is changing very dramatically over the last few kilometers. Although we're looking there at the two leaders, Lance Armstrong and Ivan Basso, Jan Ullrich is at 1 minute and 10 seconds behind the two leaders. But just coming over the radio now, the yellow jersey is 3 minutes behind. He can only lose another 2 minutes and 24 seconds in the last 6 kilometers of this race. We may well be witnessing this afternoon a change in the overall classification.
If the tempo of the gain stays as it is now, then we certainly will see a new leader of the Tour de France, and it will be, of course, Lance Armstrong. Yellow jersey number 61 in his career. That makes him an outright 3rd in the wearers of the yellow jersey over the years. Only 2 ahead of him will be Bernard Hinault with 78, and of course Eddie Merckx with almost 100. He was quite a good rider, that Eddie Merckx, you know. This is the battle now, the Italian-American tandem heading up towards the finish. Basso on a great day for day 2. These are going to be the two men who are going to go head-to-head now in this Tour de France.
They've certainly prepared themselves properly. CSC for the Tour de France. They've had a lot of publicity out of the flat stages, and this is a dangerous thing. This is probably something Armstrong is very worried about. I don't think we need spectators coming up alongside like that, because if that guy gets into the wrong place, Armstrong could get knocked off. I think that's ludicrous.
Well, I agree with you there, and if you push him, he'll get disqualified as well. They used to have the shapes of palms of hands on the back of the gendarmes and motorbikes, and with the words, "Don't push the riders." They don't seem to do that anymore. But there we are, Armstrong passing the American flag now. Basso with him as well. Now, this is a little bit dangerous now. These riders trying to settle into their rhythm, and they don't want that rhythm disturbed.
They certainly don't. That guy nearly decked it there, and if he had that flag, would have gone right across the road in front of Armstrong and, of course, in front of Ivan Basso, and that could change the whole outlook of this race. If they were to crash here on the run-in up towards the finish, it would give the chance for the race to catch up to the two leaders, and we certainly don't want any accidents. I was talking to Belgian television a little bit earlier in the day, and they said, is there anything that Lance Armstrong fears in this Tour de France? And I said, yes, it's an accident or an incident out on the road, and the way these spectators are getting this year, it's looking like that might be a possibility.
Well, this is the face now of Jan Ullrich, the man everybody thought was the outstanding challenger to Lance Armstrong's reign as the winner of the Tour de France. And indeed, in fairness, Lance himself thought this was the man he had to beat. But the picture is changing all of the time. Looks like Ivan Basso in his fourth Tour de France is now the man to beat.
This is Georg Tocznik, the race situation as we speak. Armstrong and Basso, the two leaders, 25 seconds back to the German Georg Tocznik. Then a minute and 27 seconds further back is Jan Ullrich. And even further back is Levi Leipheimer's group. Levi Leipheimer is around about a minute and 55 seconds. But this is turning out to be a sincere demonstration of force, not by one man, but by two men. The wearer of the #1, Lance Armstrong, and the man he was with yesterday, Ivan Basso of Italy.
Well, look at this now, Paul, as he's continuing at high rev. I think Basso is just about reaching his limit here. Certainly, VOECKLER is. He's going to hang on. He's still 6 kilometers to go. It's going to be tough to protect his jersey now.
Look at his jersey on the yellow shoulders there. It's completely drenched in water. He's been sprayed all day by spectators from the side of the road. Sometimes that ice-cold water can just shake you into a bit of reality as you start to get into a situation where you're getting put to sleep by the effort that you've been dragging your body through for a series of hours. Georg Tocznik's number 81 finished high up in the overall classification in the Tour de France last year, crossed the line in 12th place. But I think Armstrong is finding himself a serious ally here in the shape of a man who wears number 61, Ivan Basso, the winner of yesterday's stage. We could be looking here at a man who's going to climb into second place on the podium, although he is worried about the length of the final time trial.
Well, 45 seconds is the gap now to Tocznik, and we're hearing that Mancebo and also Kloden have now passed Ullrich on the climb, which means that Ullrich has, or they haven't given us a time check, but they've gone through it 1 minute and 10 seconds. Tocznik is losing ground at 45 seconds, and so these are the two riders now, without a shadow of a doubt, who will fight out the stage today. The same two as yesterday.
We're looking here down onto the shoulders of Jan Ullrich here, who's catching one of the race referees here as he gets into the final 5 kilometers of today's stage, and it's going to be a very difficult 5 kilometers for the German, who all he can do right now, if he's hoping to keep the possibility of winning the Tour de France, he's going to have to do something very special. 2 minutes and 11 seconds to Ullrich, and that is again a huge, massive margin that Armstrong is carving out at the front end of this bike race. And the next time check we get will be the time check to the yellow jersey. Ullrich has lost a huge chunk of his time there, as I'm looking here down onto the shoulders of Francisco Mancebo.
Well, Mancebo was just a couple of seconds in front of Kloden, but I don't see Kloden at all at the moment. This is every man for himself now. This is a Spanish rider, of course. They are Spanish spectators, and they are cheering him up. But here we come now as we head up to 4 kilometers to go. And that, in effect, is 4 kilometers to the finish, and it's still these two. Now, we're lifting out of the steep section for a while. We're getting onto the plateau itself, and those two riders are still 45, 50 seconds ahead. Look at the crowd now we were telling you about earlier. These people have been here for 2 days awaiting the arrival of the Tour de France. They had hoped, most of them, they would have seen a Spanish rider coming up. But this is the first Spanish rider on the road now, Francisco Mancebo, having a great tour, by the way.
Just waiting for race radio to crackle through with a time gap coming back to the yellow jersey. I've just had a time gap of 3.5 minutes, but any moment now we'll have an idea just exactly what the position is of Thomas VOECKLER on the road. Ullrich just getting on with the job in hand, just riding as he can to try and limit his losses on the slopes of this very difficult climb. 10 miles of climbing from the bottom up to the summit of the Plateau de Bay. Any minute now, the race radio should crackle through and tell me what the distance is between Lance Armstrong at the front and the yellow jersey of Thomas Voeckler. And it must be getting fairly close now to the 4-minute mark, and it might be even more than that.
Well, in distance, and it looks as though Voeckler has decided to try and go round Axel Merckx, so I thought it was giving him a little bit of a breather there. That's Merckx found his legs again to get back onto the maillot jaune. They are 1.5 kilometres separated now, Armstrong and Voeckler. And that is probably going to be approaching 3.5 minutes. He is 5 minutes 24 behind overnight. But of course, Armstrong will get a win bonus of either 20 seconds for first or 12 seconds for second. And we'll have to take that into consideration as well. There's the crowd opening up like magic now. This is Francisco Mancebo, who continues to spearhead up the mountain in a good finish position, as he did yesterday.
Well, the first two riders on the road, and then third on the road is Georg Tocznik. Next is Francisco Mancebo, and then Andreas Kloden. The 2 minutes and 25 seconds is Gilberto Simoni. And this, in fact, is Jan Ullrich catching one of Lance Armstrong's teammates, Acevedo.
2:25, he's down now, Jan Ullrich, and that is a huge gap.
This is Ullrich catching the Portuguese teammate of Armstrong, who looks over his shoulder, wants to get out of the way. Ullrich now able to take advantage of his big power now. He's onto the slightly flatter part of the course. It is an unbelievable, interminable climb this here to the summit of the Plateau de Bay. 10 miles of racing. We haven't yet had the time gap, but I would estimate it's around about 4 minutes. Accelerating now away from Axel Merckx, just trying to hold on to his jersey for one more day.
Well, the crowd are being lifted here as they see the maillot jaune still fighting to stay in that yellow jersey, but up front by about 1.5 kilometres. We're hearing now that the maillot jaune is 4 minutes behind. He is 5 minutes 24 behind overnight. I don't think he can do it as they now arrive at 3 kilometres from the summit. Basso working with Armstrong, a déjà vu of only yesterday. These two riders are slaughtering the men in the Tour de France.
Déjà vu of the same face, but there's more of a grimace on the face here this afternoon of Ivan Basso, because he also is realizing that he can ride himself up high in the overall classification too. He started the day in 6th place in exactly the same time as Andreas Kloden, and he will move up, I think, into 2nd place at the end of the day. Armstrong is just completely and utterly concentrated on the job in hand. He didn't even look at the man with him in the breakaway here as he went past. All he's doing is concentrating on keeping that tempo in his legs, keeping them ticking over. You can feel the crowd. Look at that, the Spaniards, the Germans, everybody's cheering this young man. I think the whole world is pushing this man to stay in the yellow jersey for just one more day.
I've still got the feeling he might do it, you know, but he's just over that kilometre separated. But, you know, we're getting a little bit easier for the moment on the plateau, and he seems to get strong again. This is Mancebo here, who's still very well placed on the road. So Georg Tocznik should be a little bit further up the road. You can see the Basque crowd here from Spain looking for the first Spanish rider. Well, that's him, Mancebo. He might be closing in too on Tocznik, because here he is.
Here he is, Georg Tocznik, number 3 on the road. He'll be riding high in the overall classification at the end of today. We've had a serious sort out here in the Pyrenees. In fact, Mancebo is 1 minute and 15 seconds behind the two leaders, who are still tapping out an unbelievably difficult rhythm. Neither of them taking any turns at all at the back. They're actually both riding very well together, sharing the pacemaking. Armstrong, Basso was asked yesterday, did Armstrong talk to you in the final few kilometres? He said, no, not a word. He just looked to me as if to say, let's both work together here and try and build as big an advantage as we can over everybody else in this bike race.
Well, this has been an incredible day in the Tour de France. It's on the weekend over 2 days. It's shown us that Jan Ullrich doesn't appear to be up to it, but he does recover in the last week. He is a remarkable rider. And, you know, the body has changes when the mountains change. You won't be saying yet that Armstrong has won this Tour de France, but he's certainly gone a long way to possibly winning the Tour de France. There he goes, still dancing around those flags there. They're not cheering on Spaniards, they're cheering on an American and an Italian here as we race towards the Spanish frontier, but we stay in France as the race direction there tries to clear the crowd out the way Armstrong is watching the waters part. It's a familiar scene at this stage of a Tour de France.
Unbelievable, the crowd here. I don't think we've seen crowds like this for many, many years on the slopes of the Pyrenees. They all came out really to support one man. They were looking to support Iban Mayo today, and he is probably around about 25 minutes in arrears. Safety at last, the safe haven of the last 2 kilometers. A quick word there, Armstrong looking across. Let's keep riding, let's keep pushing together. I'm not worried about the victory of the stage this afternoon. I'm worried about putting time between myself and everybody else. If you've got any power left in those legs, let's work together. This is the flatter part of the course. Armstrong needs another 1.5 minutes over the yellow jersey if he wants to be in yellow tonight.
Well, don't forget that Armstrong in time is just over 1 minute ahead in the overall classification of Ivan Basso. He can't afford to let him go snatching those 20-second time bonuses if he's going to climb like this for next week. So he's going to have to take him on today. I don't think they said anything there when they went under that banner, but Armstrong certainly gave him the big look as they went under the 2 kilometers to go. Look at this now. And standing in the middle there, and we cut away from it, was a rather silly spectator. However, Tocznik is still lying in 3rd place on the road. But let's stay with these 2 leaders if we can, because I think Lance Armstrong sooner or later will try to attack. Now all the crowd are behind the barriers for the last 2 kilometers.
It's a bit of safety now, a bit of sanity returning to the front end of the bike race, and what a bike races have been up the Plateau de Bay here. This is the 3rd man on the road, and you can see the slope has got just that slight bit easier as he's managed to get it onto the bigger chainring now. 4 minutes and 10 seconds for the yellow jersey at 3 kilometers to go. I think he is going to do it because he won't lose too much time, Phil, on this slightly easier final 2 kilometer section. And
well, 4 minutes 10 seconds, Paul. He's still got 3 kilometers to go. He is racing to save his yellow jersey through the Pyrenees when everybody thought he wouldn't have a chance. And if he does, he will go on for a couple of days yet. Look at this now. Jan Ullrich racing through the Basque crowd as he drives through towards the summit, but losing time. Here comes the Maillot Jaune, still dancing on those pedals, still from somewhere finding the strength that only a Maillot Jaune can give you.
He's coming all the way from the Caribbean. I think this young man grew up in the Martinique, in the Caribbean, one of the French departments, and he's now just trying to lift himself that little bit more. 4 minutes and 10 seconds. He can only lose 1 minute and 14 seconds over the last 2 kilometers of the race. Armstrong and Basso there riding side by side inside the final kilometer. 1,000 meters to go. But what's going to be important today really is the time gaps back to everybody else in this event. It really is almost a replay of 2 years ago on the very same climb.
Well, 2 years ago it was Armstrong La Mongie, Armstrong Plateau de Bay. Yesterday it was Basso La Mongie. We'll find out who it's going to be in a second or so's time. There's the time bonuses we've told you about. 20 seconds, 12 and 8 is the way they distribute times for the first 3 riders to finish. That could spell doom for VOECKLER because he is going to be very close to losing that Maillot Jaune.
These 2 guys are still working well together. They've both got an advantage to take out of this 2-man breakaway. They are both making themselves head and shoulders above everybody else in this bike race. Number 3 on the road, number 81 on his back, Georg Tocznik, the time trial champion of Austria, 12th in the Tour de France last year. He will be well inside of the top 10 by the end of the day tonight because we will see and we will register some very big time gaps.
Well, are we waiting to see now? Lance Armstrong poised to strike. He's put the man up front there in Basso. He won't allow him to win this, I'm sure of that. He's even zipped up his jersey here. He's preparing for the jump for the line. Basso is driving on. He won in La Mongie, but Lance Armstrong is looking for stage win number 16, but more importantly, his first stage win individual here in the year 2004.
200 meters to go. On the front, Ivan Basso. Armstrong's looking very calm and concerted, waiting, I think, for the acceleration. He's got his jerseys closed. There's not going to be too much drag when he opens up the sprint.
And this is it. Armstrong is waiting to the last moment. He's taken no chances here. He's driving to the line now. Armstrong at the Plateau de Bay like it was 2 years ago. And there could be a yellow jersey waiting. Armstrong wins. The crowd are cheering all of the way. Basso crosses the line in second place. They could now be first and second in the Tour de France. That will depend purely on the courage and the heart of the man who currently is still 2 kilometers down the mountain. but there's no doubt who Armstrong is today as he gets his 17th stage win in a Tour de France.
I think there's no doubt either who his major rival is going to be. It's going to be a man by the name of Ivan Basso. Jan Ullrich, further down the slope, has still got a kilometre to go to the finish. He's going to lose himself again, I would think, this afternoon, as easily as much as 2.5 minutes. The crowd out here are going absolutely ballistic over that victory of Lance Armstrong, but they will also go crazy when the young man in the yellow jersey comes up to the finishing line in a few moments. This is Georg Tocznik. I'm looking at the clock on the finishing line, which has read already 1 minute since those two guys cut it. And you know what? There's going to be some big time gaps, Phil, set out over this last 16 kilometres up to today's stage. 1 minute and 6 seconds for Georg Tocznik in third place. 1 minute 6 seconds. Tocznik is going to make an acceleration. He was a man who rode so well yesterday. He was third over the line yesterday. Andreas Clauden and Mancebo also had a great day yesterday. They are now coming up as well. The clock counts down as now Clauden comes up to the line, 1:26, and there'll be the same time for Mancebo as well. Now we're waiting to see the arrival, of course, of Jan Ullrich, and here he comes. He again looks a beaten man, and now surely he's going to have to help Andreas Clauden, who I think today will become the new leader of T-Mobile. He was a man we expected to ride well very many years ago when he won Paris-Nice, and now I think he's just assumed the role of leader of T-Mobile. Maybe they made a serious error leaving out Cadel Evans out of this Tour de France and putting everything onto the shoulders of Jan Ullrich, because Ullrich, even when he recently won the Tour of Switzerland, looked very fragile over the big mountain passes. Look at the time gap for Ullrich, 2 minutes and 6 seconds. He's still got 300 meters to go. It's going to be 2 minutes and 40 seconds on the line, I would calculate. Which is going to put him down something like 5 minutes on Lance Armstrong overnight. Let's see, he's fought all the way. He flicks the gear shift there. He goes up a gear. He's still, well, one thing, he has learned to suffer in this Tour de France. He's done that. He's fighting like the champion he is. As he comes up to the line now, he's coming up only for 6th place at the top of the Plateau de Baille. And this big man drives up, the crowd giving him an enormous cheer. Hits the line, 2:42 approximately. Right, the next man we're waiting for is the yellow jersey, and we're going to see whether he can cut the line 5 minutes and 4 seconds after Lance Armstrong. Let's not forget, Armstrong got himself a 20-second time bonus for cutting the line in first place. That means that this man has 5 minutes and 4 seconds advantage over Armstrong. Team manager up alongside him, explaining that to him immediately. Come on, you can still do it. 3 minutes and 9 seconds since Armstrong and Basso cut the finishing line. You're doing it. Push, find something else. Where can you get it from? He's been doing this all day. He might just do it, but Phil, it is going to be so very close for this man. Time, 5 minutes and 4 seconds. He's got to hit the clock at that point or better. At the moment, the clock says at 3 minutes 29. This man deserves this at least, because he's never, ever given up in the Tour de France. We've seen Acevedo finish 7th, Morrow 8th, Cocchioli 9th. Now we're looking at the 10th place finisher here. Gilberto Simoni, twice a winner of the Giro d'Italia. He is now in. The clock is saying 3:48, 450 meters to go. This man lives to fight again. The Tour de France has thrown out a hero in this first 10 days, and he's going to keep this yellow. You won't believe the crowd here. They are cheering him like a winner of the Tour de France. He's riding up now to a maillot jaune after 2 vicious days in the Pyrenees. We thought 3 hours ago it was all over for Thomas VOECKLER. Now, in the next minute, he'll still be in the yellow jersey. He's got to watch. He's got to get there at 5 minutes, 4 seconds. It's desperate here. Pereiro comes in as well now, and they are still finishing, and that'll be Stefan Goubert behind him. But the clock says 4:29, 4:30, 5:04 is what he's got to beat. He can see the clock now as he lines up. He's got the yellow jersey for at least another day, probably for 2. Fantastic. What can you say?
Unbelievable. So Basso Armstrong one day, Armstrong Basso the next, and Andreas Clauden ahead of his team leader Jan Ullrich on both stages. Ullrich lost 2:42 to Armstrong and 1 minute 15 to Clauden. But the key result for France and for the neutrals was Thomas VOECKLER's. With Armstrong's 22nd win bonus, he lost 5 minutes and 2 seconds. His lead at the start of the day was 5:24. Behind him, the big losers were the big names. Roberto HERAS finished over 21 minutes down in 49th, and Ivan Mayo struggled home with the sprinters, losing nearly 38 minutes. Scholl's been waiting a while for Lance's first stage win, and although it wasn't the flamboyant attack he's launched in years past, it was nonetheless authoritative for that. His relentless pressure in the Pyrenees had ridden everyone off his wheel, except for Ivan Basso.
He's a fighter. I mean, he was today we were in the group, and I could see that he was suffering, but at the same time I couldn't get rid of him. So he hung in there, and I wasn't strong enough to go. So listen, Ivan's is a great rider, and now and for the future, he's a rider that we actually last winter tried really hard to get, and he ended up going to CSC. But we think highly of him, and he'll be tough.
Thomas Voeckler's proved himself pretty tough as well, still in the race lead against all prediction and expectation, probably including his own. Lance Armstrong moved up into second, 22 seconds behind Voeckler, and 1 minute 17 ahead of Ivan Basso. Jan Ullrich was the closest of the pre-race favourites, 7 minutes back in 8th. Well, the brow was knitted with pain and determination as he held on to his race lead at La Mongie, but the sight of the finish line at the Plateau de Bay smoothed it out like a bedsheet, and his expression crossed the fine line from grimace to smile just before he crossed the line to stop the clock. We thought he was just a caretaker for the yellow jersey, Thomas Voeckler. He's turned into one of the most inspirational custodians it's had for years. A few of the big-name disappointments of the race could do with a bit of Voeckler's spirit. Levi Leipheimer and Oscar Sevilla still just about registered on race radar after stage 13. But Roberto HERAS was getting on for 28 minutes behind, and Ivan Mayo was more than 3/4 of an hour adrift.